Hello everybody and welcome back for the second segment of the August 13th Trips and Traps. Andy Serling once again, joined by our Donovan.
Got a good mix of races to bring you in this segment. We got a turf route, a turf sprint, a 2-year-old race in the dirt. So let's get to the action here. And this race actually sent into us by Thaddeus Morawski. We're looking at the number 1 Joyous. It's the second race from Sunday afternoon, and Joyous is the number 1 horse in here, breaking from the middle of the pack. And basically, Joyous, gets off to a decent beginning for a horse that has very little speed and trying the turf for the first time. I think the rider pretty much puts Joyous in about as good a spot as you can hope for coming out of the gate here. Yeah,
well, he certainly has no speed. And, it's funny, we watched so many races over again and over again trying to find races for this show, and didn't see a lot of races where horses had particularly tough trips. And I can understand this horse ends up steadying a little bit, but I think you have to ask yourself something, and we're going to highlight Joyous towards the back of the pack on the inside. How much of a great trip do you expect horses to get? And this is a horse that saved ground basically the whole way. Got mildly steady, as we'll see some point late in the backstretch. Ends up splitting horses, moving out too wide as they come into the stretch, and has a little bit of trouble, but really had a very good trip. And I did run okay, and certainly improved over the dirt races that have been running in the past. First time on the turf for George Arnold, who does very well first time on the turf. But ultimately, I don't think that you can expect a better trip.
Well, the 2 horses that are going to run 1, 2 in the race are second and third right now. The 11 horse, To The Point, bears out right about here. And the race complexion changes because things kind of pick up. The horses at the back get closer to the front of the field. Things just kind of bunch up here a little bit. And you see the 1 Joyous kind of get closer up and have to maybe just tap on the brakes a little bit there. But the real trouble for Joyous is going to come up pretty soon here. We'll highlight him right there just to show you where he is in the race here. It's a filly, I'm sorry. So we'll highlight her. But she's in behind horses here and going to have to steady as they come around the turn. Things kind of get a little tight for Joyous here.
Yeah, they get a little tight, no doubt. She might have been cost a length, but she's also saving ground the whole way. And I don't know. The race is won on the front end by the favorite. Horse who finishes second, Gold Doro, finished second to Eric and I in a horse suit, I'm afraid. And I don't know who else really did much running. And, Joyous did pick it up a little bit. And he's racing inside of horses, so I guess it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm not trying to fault her. I just think ultimately, how much more can you expect from her? Next time she runs, if this race puts her in the mix, that's fine. But I don't know how much better a trip you can expect.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the keys for betting Joyous back here, in the next race that she runs, would be kind of just to not think about the trouble that she had. If you think she's good enough to win the race, go ahead and bet her. But I wouldn't be so keen on going and bet her because of the trouble she had. She might end up in the right spot where she might just be the best horse in the race.
Right, she might. It's a mix and match situation. You have to take the good with the bad. You have to say, okay, I think this bad happened to her. But then you do have to ask yourself, what, if any, good happened to her? And I do think enough good happened to her that I didn't see any reason to move this horse forward, but that's just our opinion.
All right, let's get on to our second race in this segment here. We're going to take a look at the turf sprint. This was the Finney Stakes from Sunday. We're going to look at the 8 KARAKORUM ELEKTRA and the 10 Smart and Fancy. We're also going to take a look at another horse in this race a little bit, the 11 Secret Gypsy. He was really more of a dirt horse in here, but let's show you here what happens. You see KARAKORUM ELEKTRA on the outside, the red and black silks kind of steadying, losing that spot here, and you're also going to see Secret Gypsy there in the blue cap, steady a little bit there, and we have Smart and Fancy, the 10 in the pink and black.
I think the important thing to note right here is where the 10 Smart and Fancy is and where the 8 KARAKORUM ELEKTRA is. And yes, KARAKORUM ELEKTRA had some trouble. Her trouble's a little later. But Smart and Fancy is just getting completely steadied and squeezed back out of the race. And now, bang, about 60 yards later, the 2 of them are head and head. And actually, KARAKORUM ELEKTRA is in front of Smart and Fancy. And the winner of this race actually is the horse on the front end, or right battling inside. So it was certainly not a dynamic. And you've got Smart and Fancy now behind KARAKORUM ELEKTRA and outside of her. The dynamic of the race certainly wasn't helping horses closing, and while KARAKORUM ELEKTRA was coming up one of the perfect trips of the century victories and a victory over much weaker, was facing much tougher horses here. The Smart and Fancy, who finishes second this race, should have been an unsaddled winner by about 3 lengths.
You'll see Smart and Fancy tip out eventually here under Ramon Dominguez and run very well with a good finish, but you also see KARAKORUM ELEKTRA down inside, and those red and black silks just being stymied here with nowhere to go. Really just no place for the jock to put KARAKORUM ELEKTRA anywhere to get a seam to run here. And these turf sprints, you got to have a quick turn of foot, and you get in trouble like that, you're going to have no chance. But you see the great finish here from the 10 Smart and Fancy on the outside. Should have won this race by 3 or 4.
Oh yeah, this isn't even close. It's a joke. If you bet her, you should be furious. And I don't think I bet anybody in this race, or I may have liked the horse who finished third, but wasn't that good a price. KARAKORUM ELEKTRA, I don't know what she does from here because she's not really good enough to beat these kind of horses, so she's going to have to find a middle-of-the-road race. And yes, she had trouble and couldn't run the stretch. ultimately, I think she's a horse that was dressed up by prior form. Maybe she's dressed down a little from this race. We'll see.
See if Linda Rice gets her back one more time at the 5.5 furlong up here at Saratoga. Let's get on to our next race, and this is a baby race from Sunday race number 7. This one sent in to us by HUD, and we're looking at a few horses in here. We're looking at the 4 Gunrock, who's going to run a good second here. The 1 Middle of the Night, and at 9 I've Got the Fever. And you see the 4 Gunrock in the Middle of the Night get off to slow beginnings here. They're toward the back of the pack as we start the race.
Yeah, Middle of the Night will end up finishing 10th, second to last in this race, and the rail really compromised him. And who knows, maybe this horse could run a little bit better, but I'm not sure. You just don't know. And Gunrock finishes second here, does run very well, and you see where they are now towards the back of the pack, the 1 and 4. There were a lot of horses that had trips in here. For my money, the horses that ran first and third in here, who finished first and third, or second and first now, I still think they ran the best races because they fought it out on the front end. And also, Aconite, who wins this race, he's battling inside of the unbelievably heavily bet Rain King, who's got the lead. Battles that one inside, lets him go, takes around him. You've got all these horses wide, but you know, these horses up front did a lot of the heavy lifting in this race, and they still held around at the end. And don't be deceived by the slow time of 1:12 and 77. This was a weird day. The Honorable Miss was run over 2 seconds slower than the Fabulous Strike, Alfred Vanderbilt. They had back-raked the track as rain was coming. The track was slow. They opened it up before Fabulous Strike. The track changed dramatically. Aconite is battling. You've got a Gary Contessa horse in orange, well on the outside. A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on. I think really what might turn out to be the most interesting horse in this race is the 9 I've Got Fever, who was basically out in the 7 or 8 path the whole way around the track, and is going to make a rally here to get 4th. I mean, I would have given this horse no chance whatsoever, seeing where she was around the turn, where he was around the turn, and this horse was sent off at 58-1 in here, so definitely ran big. And we're going to take a look at the head-on shot here just to show you how wide this horse is here. I've Got the Fever rather, just way out there in the 7 or 8 path, and just basically in a different race.
Yeah, this was a very interesting 2-year-old race run in Saratoga because there's a whole lot going on. I think we could do an entire Trips and Traps segment of this, going through one horse after another. Icebox, a Nick Zito first-time star, very, very green behind horses, ran a little at the end. How much were horses running at the end because the battles up front were tiring? How well are the horses up front doing this race and finishing first and third? There's a lot of decisions to make about horses in here, and this is a race that may look slow to people on paper that isn't as slow as people think because of the track, how the track was playing. This is a race that I believe is going to produce possibly some interesting results down the road.
Always cool to look back and see how those 2-year-old races produce moving forward down the rest of the season. So that'll do it for us here on Trips and Traps. Keep in mind that viewer email address tripsandtraps@NIREinc.com. As you can see, we do like to use some of the races sent in by people.
Use the help.
Yeah, we could use the help, and whether or not we agree or disagree, well, that's another story. But we appreciate your input there, and that'll do it for another episode of Trips and Traps.